I played every Naruto Ultimate Ninja Heroes game. Here's my thoughts. So this is the second part of my Ultimate Ninja series. If you missed the first part, there should be a link above that you can click, and I'll also put a link in the description. You should definitely check that one out. I'll be referring to it a lot in this video. The Ultimate Ninja Heroes series is a separate series of Ultimate Ninja games that was released exclusively on the PlayStation Portable, also known as the PSP. So before I start, let me just say that I really appreciate all of the support. The first part of this video got a really awesome response, and I'm super thankful. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to see more, please consider subscribing because it definitely helps me out a lot. Oh, and I've been trying to be active on Twitter lately, so definitely come check that out too. Also, my official Discord server has some really awesome people in it, and I'd love it if you join too, watcher. Links are in the description. Anyways, let's get into the games. Naruto Ultimate Ninja Heroes was released for the PSP in the West in 2007, so this one's release is a bit interesting. Thanks to the wonderful people in my Discord server, we found out that this game actually never released in Japan. Instead, it looks like it's a modified version of the second game released specifically for Western audiences. There's some changed moves and a few missing characters, but the addition of new 3-on-3 fights, which I'll get to. Anyways, to get this out of the way immediately, yeah, this looks almost identical to the Ultimate Ninja games on the PS2. In fact, they play almost identically too. The only really big gameplay change in the actual fights here is that the ultimate moves don't require any additional input. Once you activate one, it's just a straight cutscene without any extra fluff. They are scaled down a tiny bit visually, but that's to be expected, and they still look really good. The biggest change overall, though, is that you can now create a team of up to 3 characters to fight up to 3 other characters. While the fights themselves are still one-on-one, defeating an opponent with the first character leads to a fight against the second opponent with that same character, including any lost HP, albeit with a slight boost for winning. Visually, I mentioned this earlier, but this game is gorgeous for a PSP game. While it did take a lot from the PS2 games, it didn't bring back the original shading style. Instead, the style is similar to that from Ultimate Ninja 4 and 5, and much closer to the modern anime game aesthetic. Every character also has a pretty thick outline, but I assume that's to make them easier to see on such a small screen. Either way, this game looks fantastic for a PSP game, and the animations are top-notch, even on this scaled-down portable version of the series. Yeah, the textures are a bit blurry, but these games were also never meant to be seen at this high of a resolution. All of the PSP games look so good. The modes in Ultimate Ninja Heroes are Heroes Mode, Versus CPU, Promotion Test, Wireless Mode, Naruto's House, Parameter Power-Up, and Options. Heroes Mode is the primary single-player mode. In this mode, you choose a team to take on these challenges. The default starting teams are Team Kakashi, Team Guy, Team Kurenai, and Team Asuma, but you see more later on. Every challenge has a series of stages, each taking place on a different map. You can also create custom teams too. Once you've chosen your team, you then choose the fighting order of your team, basically Pokemon Stadium style. Once you've chosen the order, you can then use skills and look at the achievements for the battle. Skills are special bonuses to your characters that can increase your team's stats or hurt the enemy team. Skills are only usable a limited number of times during the chapter though, so it's best to save them from when you really need them. The skills are also character specific, and every character has different available abilities. Achievements are basically just extra bonus requirements. Every battle has different achievements, which include things like throw the opponent X number of times or use this move X number of times. Getting these nets you extra points at the end of each battle. Clearing the stages on this mode unlocks characters, points, and scroll items that you can use in the Promotion Test mode. Versus CPU mode is exactly what you'd expect. You can fight one-on-one battles with a CPU enemy. Promotion Test is basically just a mission mode, except in this one you have to unlock the missions using various combinations of scrolls you've acquired. Every mission set has multiple missions in it with various requirements in the fights. It's pretty simple stuff that we've seen before in previous games, just in a different format. Naruto's House contains the item viewer, profile editor, and staff credits. The item viewer is like a mini gallery. Unfortunately, there's no model viewer here, which is kind of a bummer, but this is on the PSP, so I guess I understand. You can find an image viewer though, and a BGM player, and also a place to watch the special movies. The special movies are these movies that play when you complete the modes and have combinations of characters on the teams that you use. It's nice that these special movies are here since there's a lot of combinations of characters. Profile editor is the place where you can change your profile for wireless battles. There's not a ton of customization here, but you can change the character on the card along with their comment. Parameter Power-Up mode is where you can use the points you earn in other modes to power up and customize your characters. These customized characters can be used in the Versus CPU mode, the Promotion Test mode, and in the wireless battles. The stats you can increase are attack, defense, speed, chakra, stamina, and ninjutsu. Every upgrade progressively costs more and more points. You can then choose these customized characters from the character select and the modes they're usable in. So I kind of went over this game really fast. and I'll explain that here in a second. My overall impressions of Ultimate Ninja Heroes is that it really does just feel like a mobile version of one of the first couple of Ultimate Ninja games on the PS2. It doesn't feel quite as snappy as the later PS2 games, but it doesn't really have to. This game evokes that same feeling as the earlier ones, and I think that gives it a very specific kind of charm. That being said, I do wish there was a proper story mode, especially if this is just a modified version of the second game, which again, I'll get to. Overall though, if you liked Ultimate Ninja games on the PS2, you'll like this game. Naruto Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 The Phantom Fortress was released for the PSP in 2006 in Japan and 2008 in the West. Yeah, okay, now I understand, and I think you might also understand once I explain this. Gameplay-wise and visually, this is identical to the first game, which lends more credence to the first game actually being a cut-down version of this game. This one has a couple of more stages related to the story mode and a couple of new characters who were apparently just cut out for the first game. And of course, there is an actual story mode here. The menu layouts here are almost exactly the same too, but the character select menu is a little nicer in my opinion. The modes in Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 are the Mugenjo, Heroes mode, versus CPU, wireless mode, Ninja Road, Naruto's house, and options. The Mugenjo is this game's story mode. The entire thing takes place from Naruto's perspective and is about a dangerous castle that pops up in the village unexpectedly. The cutscenes here are interesting. There's two main kinds. The first is the actual cutscenes. These include things like the intro and some of the transitional scenes. These are essentially just static images that are stylized in such a way that creates movement. They're simple, but they still have a lot of charm. The other cutscenes are what make up a vast majority of the scenes and are just dialogue scenes. The dialogue looks almost like something you'd see in an older JRPG or visual novel, which I kind of dig. This is something that basically every game I played in this video does, and I really like it. The dialogue is fully voiced too, so I definitely have to give this game major props. The gameplay here is almost like a dungeon crawler. You travel through the game's setting, which is a castle. To do this, you control a little 2D Naruto as you climb floors. Every floor has multiple rooms, and there are a few different room types. The first is a drama room, which is just a room that shows you a cutscene, sometimes followed by a fight. The second is a treasure room where you can acquire a random item or items. The final is an unstable space, which requires a scroll to proceed into. Every scroll type summons a different room. The room types are battle rooms, tree climbing rooms, shadow possession rooms, amusement rooms, riddle rooms, and clone rooms. A lot of these rooms are mini games from other Ultimate Ninja games that I've already covered, which is a really awesome callback, but I'll still describe them here since there's a few new ones too. Tree climbing rooms are a return to the tree climbing minigame from Ultimate Ninja 3 actually. This time though, it's a solo run. The game works exactly the same though. You climb up a tree and try to avoid obstacles on the way. You can pick up speed boosts, but if you hit an obstacle, you lose most of your speed. Shadow possession rooms are where you play the shadow possession minigame from Ultimate Ninja 2. Amusement rooms are just a slot machine, and these are entirely random chance. You can spend these tokens you get on a slot spin, and you can stop each reel one at a time. At any point, you can exchange your remaining tokens on ninja points, or you can just save them. Riddle rooms are rooms where Ruka tells you a riddle and you have to solve it. While by riddles, it really just means Naruto trivia. He asks you 3 questions and you get ninja points based on how well you did. Fortunately, I have gotten at least far enough into the series to know how to answer these. Clone rooms are rooms where Abisu makes 2 clones of himself and then shuffles around. You have to choose which one's the real one. There's 3 rounds, and at the end you get ninja points based on how well you did. So sometimes on the maps, there's also these barriers in the way that you have to use skills to bypass. Speaking of skills, they work kind of like how they worked in the Heroes mode in the first game. You can use them at any time, and they change based on who's on your team. You can't proceed to the next room until you've cleared the previous room either. The default character is, of course, Naruto, but at various points, other characters will join your team and become usable in the mode. The story is still from Naruto's perspective, but you can play as any of your unlocked characters. The team setup is 1 leader and 3 members. The leader also has to be above Genin rank, meaning that not anyone can be a leader. Each leader also has different stat boosts they provide. For example, Shikamaru provides a +1 to the tools stat. Whenever you run into a battle, you have these mission style requirements, as is tradition now, and when you complete the battles, you earn something called ninja points. You can use these points in Ninja Road, which I'll get to in a bit. Completing the Mugenjo unlocks a secondary mode called Hidden Mugenjo, which is the same mode and story, but from Jiraiya's perspective as they descend the castle. It's really cool that they went and added a whole second campaign after you beat the first. You know, I think the idea that while Naruto and company are climbing the castle, there's a whole secondary story going on where someone else is in the castle. I just think it's a really neat concept. I don't think I've ever seen a game do this before. Heroes mode returns and functions pretty much the same as it did in the first game. You select the path you want to go on, and then you select your team. You can pick a preset team or create a custom team from your unlocked characters, just like in the first game. Ninja Road is the mode where you can use your accumulated ninja points to unlock items. For every 100 ninja points you have, he walks 10 meters. Every 10 meters unlocks an item. You can view these items in the Naruto's house mode, which is returned and functions again as the gallery. It works exactly the same as the previous game too. You can view images, listen to music, watch videos, see photos, and watch the game's credits. Something I love is that the photos aren't just photos. In fact, there's entire voiced cutscenes that accompany the photos. They're not animated in the traditional way, but they're super cinematic and really a fun, neat addition to this. In my eyes, this makes up for these games not having the model viewers that we saw in the PS2 games. Again, this is super cool. So this game, in my opinion, is just a better version of the first game. In fact, that's probably by design. I actually don't see any reason to go back to the first game, given that pretty much all of its content can be found here in the second one, plus some. This is pretty close to the perfect mobile version of the PS2 games experience-wise. The only thing really missing is Shippūden content. Speaking of... Naruto Shippūden Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 was released for the PSP in Japan in 2009 and the West in 2010. Interestingly, this one doesn't use the same naming convention as the other PSP games in Japanese and is instead called Narutimate XL 3, making it actually a direct sequel to Ultimate Ninja 5. The gameplay here is what I'd consider the first big departure for the series since it began, even by PS2 standards. You still control a character, but there's now up to 3 other characters on the battlefield at the same time. While the overall control scheme and general gameplay hasn't changed, it is slightly slowed down to accommodate all the people on the screen at once. The moves are also simplified a bit, with every character only having a single special move that they can use at any time. Ultimate moves are also still usable and usually have you do a version of the button input we saw in previous PS2 Ultimate Ninja games, albeit before the move actually activates. One new thing that I noticed was that some moves can now be charged up before you use them, like Sasuke's Chidori. This makes them last longer and makes them do a lot more damage. However, it is riskier and more difficult to pull off without getting interrupted. You can also now switch modes at will in this game as long as you've charged up enough chakra, unlike previous games where it was activated only after using an ultimate move. Weirdly, having more characters on the screen at once doesn't really make the game any more complicated. In fact, I'd argue it's a bit more fun this way since there's always something happening on the screen. I like this change, and I think this was definitely the next logical step for the series to keep it fresh. The modes in Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 are Master Road, Wireless Battle, Tree of Metal, Options, Practice, and Free Battle. I'm going to go a tiny bit out of order since I want to talk about the Free Battle first. In Free Battle, you can choose all 4 characters that will participate in the fights. You can also set the number of characters down to 3 or 2 if you want a smaller one-on-one fight like the previous games. After you select your characters, you can then select their special move and which team they'll be on. They can be on team A, B, C, or D, and that decides how the fight is stacked up. You could, in theory, set 3 characters on B team and only have 1 on A. It would be a 3-on-1 fight. Master Road is this game's story mode, and it immediately feels a lot like the story modes from Ultimate Ninja 4 and 5. The cutscenes aren't animated, but they're still animated, if that makes sense? It's still very cinematic, it's just different. Interestingly, the voice acting in these scenes are all in Japanese, even though the gameplay is dubbed in English. The non-cinematic dialogue scenes are very similar to the kind we saw in Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2. Visual novel-esque, and it's all in English. The gameplay here is linear and broken up into chapters. Some are what the game calls conversation events, some are battle missions, and others are just action events. There's also collectibles, but they're not really an event, more just a little mini thing you can optionally grab using your accumulated ninja points. There's also these collectible ninjutsu, which you can use to customize your characters in any of the battle modes. Completing an event on the map allows you to continue on to the next event. You also collect bonuses called tactics that give you certain extras like a stat boost. You can use the tactics as much as you want, but each one has a point cost, and since you can use the points elsewhere, it's almost painful to use them sometimes. Conversation events are just dialogue cutscenes. You watch them and you move on to the next event. Battle events are, well, battles. You fight an opponent, and if you win, you can continue. Of course, this is an Ultimate Ninja game, so there are sometimes special requirements, but that's to be expected at this point. Action events, however, are the most interesting events. These aren't just fights. These are full-fledged action platforming brawler stages. You can run left or right, double jump, use chakra to jump even higher, and even use special moves like Rasengan. You're constantly running into enemies you have to fight along the the way, and it definitely feels a lot like an old school brawler type of game. Fortunately, the controls are carried over from the standard gameplay, so it's super easy to pick up and figure out too. My favorite part about the action events is that while they're not super complex or anything, you can use any character in most of them. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but simply having the freedom to use whoever I want in this kind of secondary gameplay style increases the fun and variety for me in a huge way. Even if their movesets aren't all that much different, it's just super cool to see and makes it feel more fresh. Anyways, sometimes there's these coins that you can find in action events, almost like the special coins in 2D Mario games that give you extra points at the end of the level. Collecting all of them in a single level gives you big bonus points. Collecting all of them in a single level gives you a big points bonus. Also, there's occasionally level hazards that you have to avoid, like this swinging log and other less explainable hazards. The story can also branch into alternate paths, which sometimes allows you to do different types of events depending on the branch that you take. Of course, you can always go back and complete all of the branches too if you want. Interestingly, the Naruto's house mode is still in this game, but it's buried in the story mode for some reason. It functions the same, even bringing back the ultimate move viewer. It's just buried in the story mode. I don't know why. While there aren't any fun collectible dioramas to look at in this one, the game does sorta kinda bring them back in a fun way. You can now unlock these things called figures that you can select in the options menu that change the menu's aesthetics. They're really cool, and honestly, they kinda fill the void that the dioramas left in my heart. Also, something I forgot to mention, there's sometimes missions that you can do with another player over a wireless connection. They're designated by this little icon over Naruto's head, and you have the option for co-op play before you start the mission. Speaking of wireless play, wireless mode is a mode that I haven't really touched much because, to be honest, I've been having trouble getting it working properly and finding people to try it with. That being said, a couple of lovely folks on my Discord server tried to get it working with me, and we just weren't able to do much. I did get it working in kind of a janky way where I was controlling both players, so I'll still try to explain how it works here. You have the option to either create a room or enter an already established room. Of course, this mode requires that both players have a copy of the game and that both players are physically near each other, at least unless you have some kind of workaround to play online that actually works properly. Other than that, it's just straight up normal battles, just wireless. Tree of Metal is the records mode. Here you can view special unlocks for playing the game along with inputting passwords, which are back by the way. The wallpapers are actual wallpapers that you can download from the game and save to your PSP to use as a background. The passwords work exactly like they did in the PS2 Ultimate Ninja games and can unlock a few things, including figures for the menus and jutsus to equip to your characters. So overall, I have to say that of the PSP games I've played so far, Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 is my favorite, and I think that's because of the simple fact that it feels like a proper sequel to the PS2 games. The first two PSP titles felt like adaptations of the PS2 games, while this one felt more like an evolution and its own thing. It has its own identity. I liked the freedom to choose, for the most part, what kind of battle you wanted to do too. Yeah, the RPG roaming stuff from Master Mode and Ultimate Ninja 4 and 5 isn't there, but there's still a good variety of gameplay and plenty of collectibles to find here. I'd say if you're looking for an Ultimate Ninja game to play and for some reason you're limited to the PSP, definitely play this one. You could argue that I'm speaking too soon with that recommendation since there's another game to cover, but let's talk about that. Naruto Shippūden Ultimate Ninja Impact was released for the PSP in 2011. This one is probably the most unique of the Ultimate Ninja games across both the PS2 and the PSP, in that it is all entirely a different gameplay style. That's right, this game is called Ultimate Ninja but plays nothing like Ultimate Ninja. That being said, I'm gonna break tradition here and only talk about the gameplay and visuals when I get to the game's story mode. The modes in Ultimate Ninja Impact are Ultimate Road, Extra Missions, Tag Missions, Battle Receipt, Gallery, and Options. Ultimate Road is this game's story mode. Dialogue scenes in this one are about the same as they have been in the past style-wise, and the cutscenes themselves are also about the same. This game's progression works incredibly similarly to Heroes 3's, albeit with a different visual style. This time though, you can't see what the whole path looks like until you unlock the branches. They also do this thing where certain paths are blocked off until later, allowing you to come back and complete them once you've satisfied a later mission. Sometimes the game straight up grants you cards. You'll sometimes run into obstacles on the map that you need certain cards to bypass. Other cards unlock game features like different difficulties. The difficulties range from easy to super hard. You can also buy cards and card pieces in shops which are located on the chapter map. So something I really like, when you select a character for a mission, sometimes they have dialogue that pertains to the specific mission they're about to do. On top of that, the missions themselves have built-in dialogue and the characters will say things related to the missions while you're exploring and fighting. On top of that, sometimes there's just entire dialogue breaks graphics during the missions. The missions themselves? Well, for anyone who has ever asked for a Naruto-themed Dynasty Warriors game, this is about as close as you can get. In fact, I'd say the weakest part of this game is the one-on-one fights, which is really weird for me. The missions are on these big open maps where you run around and fight huge mobs of enemies, and it's very satisfying to knock them all out with a big combo move. Every enemy has their own HP bar, and while no one enemy has a ton of HP, there are a lot of enemies. You can always lock on to one singular enemy, which sounds counterintuitive, but keep in mind that the PSP only has one analog stick, so it's a good way to keep your camera focused on the mob itself. The moves that you can use are basic combos using the circle button, guarding and using substitutions using the R button, and jumping using X. Triangle activates chakra charging and also allows you to use chakra special moves. Square uses ninja equipment like throwables. You can also hit triangle at different points in a combo to do a special move that's different depending on how far into the combo you are. My favorites are the ones that have a huge area of effect and can defeat a bunch of enemies at the same time. You can also use your chakra by pressing triangle to do a dash move or increase the strength of your throwables. Oh, and if you dash into an enemy at the same time as they're dashing into you, you do this kind of clash thing where you have a prompt to hit 3 buttons as fast as you can. Whoever does it faster, or just doesn't mess up first, wins the clash. At the end of some missions, you fight a boss, and sometimes if you get that boss below 50% health, you can do a series of QuickTime actions to defeat the boss in a huge cinematic move. These scenes are really cool and essentially take the place of the ultimate scenes in previous games. What's cooler about these though is that they're a bit more personalized to the mission you're doing and you only see them one time. I'll talk more about these a little bit later on. Clearing missions unlocks these puzzle pieces called card pieces. I mentioned cards earlier, but completing cards unlocks that card, which you can then equip to a character to give them certain bonuses. These are like extra health, chakra, or attack and defense power. The more powerful the card though, the more pieces they require. Every character can equip up to 4 cards and there are a ton of options. Of course, clearing missions also unlocks characters. Interestingly, the only character you can use when you begin this game is Naruto, and that's in every mode. You have to clear Ultimate Road missions to unlock more. Once you've cleared the main missions in a chapter, you unlock not only the next chapter, but also even more optional missions in the chapter you're already playing. These are called side stories, and while they're not necessary to progress, they're still really cool to have. It's not super important story stuff, just kind of side stuff that may or may not be canon. Also, this game has a pretty hefty story in general. There's 9 chapters and every chapter has a bunch of missions and dialogue scenes. For a PSP game, that's really impressive. In fact, this may be one of the meatiest stories in the entire series so far. When you start a mission in a chapter, you get an overview of the story and then the dialogue plays out. Honestly, it's just super dense, and while there's not really any traditional cutscenes, this more than makes up for it. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to mention, when you complete a story chapter, you can go back and play that story chapter as any of your unlocked characters. I like this story mode. Because this is basically a Dynasty Warriors game, they could get pretty heavy on the lore and storytelling since the fights themselves didn't have to all be one-on-ones and the dialogue could play out in the fights at any pace they wanted. In other games in the series, they're bound by the nature of the gameplay. It's not a weakness or anything, but this game does take advantage of its different style of storytelling. Oh, and the visuals in this game are the standard cel-shaded look that you'd see in modern anime games, including the newer Naruto games. It looks really good though. I especially like the use of 2D and 3D artwork blended together for some of the special scenes, but again, I'll get into that a little bit more later. The next mode is the extra missions mode. These are, well, extra missions. They all have different win conditions. Some of them just require you to win fights, but others have more specific requirements, like having to make it to a certain combo of enemies defeated or starting the battle with low HP. The final few are themed and have a story tie-in. Tag missions are another extra missions mode, but these are designed for multiplayer. You're intended to play this with another actual person through wireless connectivity, but you also have the option to play it with a computer player. In these missions, you can use whichever characters you want. You also get a more traditional character select screen on this one, which is pretty neat. Battle report mode is just the play reports, including stuff like characters used, max combos, and missions completed. The gallery in this game includes a music player and more PSP wallpapers. There's actually a wallpaper for every character in this game, so that's pretty cool. That being said, you can only really use them on a PSP, but really the best part of this game's gallery mode is the finishing blow section. This is where you can view all of the battle cutscenes that you've seen from earlier on in the game's story. Being able to watch these at any time is so awesome. Plus, being able to watch them without having to worry about needing to pick up right into the battle again just lets you enjoy them even more. These scenes are probably the best in the series, and I mean that across all the PS2 and PSP games combined. They're just so good. The way the 3D melts into the 2D and it's super seamless is just mind-blowing. They're really good. I highly recommend at least looking at the scenes in this game if you have an opportunity. Overall, I really like Ultimate Ninja Impact. That being said, I can't really call it my favorite. Not because I didn't like like it as much as the others, but because it's just so different, it's unfair to compare them. It's its own thing. I really liked the Dynasty Warriors gameplay, and honestly, they should make a full-fledged modern Dynasty Warriors using the Naruto IP. This game shows that it could work, and there's a lot more story they could cover now. Plus, I'd love to see a way grander battlefield with way more missions, more characters, and more density in the mobs. And that was it for the PSP games. I mentioned this earlier, but the first couple of PSP games really just felt like an adaptation of the gameplay style of the PS2 games. They played perfectly fine, and they're good games. Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 straight up blew the first two out of the water for me, though. It was basically a full-fledged new Ultimate Ninja title. Ultimate Ninja Impact, while it shares a name with the rest of the series, may as well have been from a different series, but it too is a great game. I'd say that every game in this series on the PSP is worth giving a shot outside of the very first one. Anyways, now we're gonna be on to the Ultimate Ninja Storm games. I'm playing them right now, so keep a lookout for the final part of my Naruto Ultimate Ninja series soon. As always, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this and want to see more, please consider subscribing. I make this kind of stuff all the time. Also, let me know in the comments what kind of games and series you want to see in the future. You're all awesome, and as always, have a fantastic day.